Hi, and welcome back to the HSP Connection with me, Philippa Robinson.
And me, Robbie Lee. This is where we share our stories, insights, and strategies to help fellow highly sensitive people navigate their own path to living a fulfilling and meaningful life.
The first 10 episodes of this podcast are conversations that Robbie and I first had on my solo podcast, Meeting of Minds. Please go and check that out if you'd like to know more. We thought that these conversations were really valuable, and we wanted to bring them over here to HSP Connection. But we've added a little twist. Before each episode, we're going to share a few thoughts we've had since listening back to the original conversations. So let's dive in. What are we talking about, or what is the episode about today, Robbie?
Well, we said we were going to talk on this episode about people pleasing and perfectionism, and we sort of touched on people pleasing. It was mostly about perfectionism. So I think we will be doing a people pleasing episode in our future. I see that. But yeah, so this one we really dove into perfectionism, one of my favorite topics.
Yeah. And we had such a great conversation about perfectionism that there wasn't really time. We didn't even think about it, really. We'd had a really big conversation around perfectionism. And I think we've got more to say on perfectionism and more to say on people pleasing. So we will definitely be coming back to those. Because I usually say I'm a recovering people pleaser, and you say you're a recovering perfectionist, but actually we're both are both.
We're both. That's right.
I think perhaps you're, right. Percentage wise, maybe you're more of a perfectionist than a people pleaser, and I'm more of a people pleaser than a perfectionist, but we definitely both exhibit traits of both, both of which are a reaction, a survival skill, a trauma response, however, I've heard them, it's funny, I've heard them referred to as lots of different things actually lately, but they're all something that we learn as an adaptation to get us through certain situations.
Absolutely.
And we talked a lot about perfectionism, which you do. It's one of your favorite topics to talk about.
It's one of my favorite topics. Yeah. And it was really funny because listening back to it this time, which was through a listener's ear, I listened and I thought, oh yeah, man, I needed to hear that again. Like, dealing with perfectionism is a thing that I do. Like, it is part of my life. And sometimes the perfectionist voice is pretty quiet, and pretty easy to work with. And other times it's really loud, like it'll show up in a really big way. And so I'm constantly using my tools and constantly reminding me, oh, hello, old friend, there you are again. Yeah. But and I say that because I'm constantly on a mission to let people know that I don't have it all figured out. Got a lot figured out. I have a lot of tools. There are things practices, and they work. And it's also not like a flipping a switch where I used to be a perfectionist. I flipped the switch and now it doesn't bother me ever again. Like, it just doesn't work that way, But the tools really do work. They really do work. And I really enjoyed our conversation together.
Yeah, me too. And I love that you called then, when you were talking about perfectionism sort of appearing again, you called it, oh, hello, old friend.
Yeah.
And I think, I can't remember now, I've listened back to it, but I can't remember whether we actually talk about it, that seeing it as a friend, seeing people pleasing, seeing perfectionism, seeing any of those trauma response type things as a friend, that is how I believe is best to deal with them. To see them as a friend that has been around for a long time, a friend who has helped us in the past, because my people pleasing definitely helped me survive my childhood.
Yes.
But then there comes a point in our adult life that those ways of being that we have learned are not serving us anymore. And, you know, if this sort of perfectionist part, people pleasing part of us is a part of us, we can't just tell it to bugger off, we don't need you anymore, because it's part of us. So right. It is, how do we deal with it? And I love that you said, old friend. I don't know whether you meant it quite as
I do actually.
Yeah. And that's how I have dealt with a lot of my trauma responses, in that I'm like, oh, okay, here you are again, but actually it's okay now. We're not, whatever danger you think we're in, or whatever harm you're trying to keep me safe from, that's not happening now. So thank you, and it's okay. I don't need you today. And slowly that voice has got a lot quieter for me.
Yeah.
Have you found the same thing?
Yeah, it's very similar for me. You know, for a while, I tried to push against it, and it felt like I was trying to war with it. And, you know, and some models out there are very much kind of more that stance. And I was just like, it didn't feel right to me inside of me. And I thought, this part of me helped me survive, as you were saying. This part serves, like, its function was to keep me safe. Like, what a loving gesture. Like, what a loving gesture. So I learned to make friends with it. I learned to honor it, and to say to it. And I mean, I literally have conversations inside of myself, you know, and I'll say, thank you. Thank you for trying to protect me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I've heard you. So I get that we're scared, or this is feeling overwhelming, or whatever the thing is. And I promise you we're safe. I got this. We're okay. And that helps, like, meeting it with love and appreciation helps the voice get quiet, versus when I tried to push against it and, you know, just fight my way through, the voice just kept getting louder and louder, which makes sense. Because if it's like, if you think about, if you and I were having a conversation and I felt like you weren't hearing me, I might get a little pushier or a little louder, or, right? It's just like, no, but Philippa, you don't get it, right? But when I feel heard, it's like, oh yeah, I got it. And I feel it's the same way with those internal voices for me. Yeah.
I agree. And that's what drives me mad about a lot of people who talk about mindset. You know, it's not just about mindset, change your mindset, because for me that would have just been something else to fail at. It is really about working with what is going on, understanding why it's happening, and then working at, okay, what's needed instead.
Yes.
And I don't think we actually, maybe we did touch on that, but that's what I've taken away, feeling from that episode. And as I say, there's so much more to come on that, I think, as we've clearly shown, because we could probably carry on talking about this now, but we won't. Was there anything in particular you wanted to talk about?
I mean, I feel like we can let people listen, unless there was another particular thing that occurred to you.
No, not really. I think we say it all in the episode. Actually, there are quite a few gems, I thought, in this episode. So I think we'll just let everybody listen.
Wonderful.
Okay, so here you are, everybody. Here's our episode that was originally entitled "People Pleasing and Perfectionism." It's now just called Perfectionism, but here you go.
Enjoy.
So now on with today's episode, and what are we talking about, Robbie?
One of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
I say this almost every time. It's a meaty topic, but it is perfectionism and people pleasing.
Well, I know nothing about these things. Nothing.
So you'll just be a brand newbie.
I'm just going to be listening to all of these. Gosh. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Like you, I know a lot about these things, but you're gonna tell us your take on all of this, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah. Thank you.
You bet. So, I mean, I guess the place I want to start is looking at perfectionism and people pleasing, both their defense mechanisms, right? They're things that we developed as children to help us navigate the world. And as kids, our lens is everything happens because of me. It's just how our brains are wired. And so when things happen that don't feel good, that are traumatic, that are scary, that the adults in our life are angry, whatever those things are, we say some version of, oh, that happened because of me. And so developing perfectionism looks like, if I could be good enough, then these things will stop happening. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they, we develop these things. We start going, okay, well, for me, it looked like, well, then I have to get straight A's. And because that was education was very valued in my family. A's are the highest grade you could get when I was growing up. So straight A's was the, end all be all for that. And then it's a reward loop, because then if you get positively rewarded for that, which I did, right? My parents were pleased with me. I got accolades. Oh, you're so smart. My teachers, oh, you're such a good student. Well, that feels good, right? I'm getting positive accolades for that. So then that teaches me, oh, okay, so this is what I need to do in order to be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it just starts perpetuating.
It does. And, I think a lot of people would I would call that, for me, it's just different words, same thing. I would say it's a survival strategy, but that's because I grew up with a lot of childhood trauma. So for me, it was a way of surviving what went on. But it's really interesting, because that example that you gave there of, trying really hard at school and getting straight A's and then getting praised for it. I mean, you can see how that can happen to a lot of children, even if they're not living with trauma. So I think what I'm getting at is that perfectionism, people pleasing, the things we're talking about today, but mainly perfectionism, they can be survival strategies for children who've grown up with trauma, but not necessarily. And also our parents weren't necessarily doing it because they knew what was going on. It was all subconscious. I mean, a lot of it is the way that they grew up, so it might be that they grew up with getting really good grades at school was what was expected. It might be completely the opposite, that because they didn't have the opportunity, and they've given the children all the opportunities, then the children are expected to get the grades. I mean, it can come from so many different angles and be quite subtle in a way.
Yes.
But it and also it becomes very invasive, and it's in you from quite a young age. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you've said that brilliantly, of course. But yeah, if you think about the messages that we're getting as kids, for me, it was around grades. There was also messages around weight, the thinness was a thing. And the messages that the boys can get about being tough, or the things that we're praised for. And to your point, often it's innocuous, like adults are trying to be helpful. They're trying to, right? But the things we're praised for, we then can interpret as, oh, that's what makes me good. That's what I need to be, right? That's what's expected.
Right? Yeah. And actually, as a parent, I don't want any parents listening to this to think, oh God, what have I done to my kids? Because I think about that all the time. But just being aware of it. I mean, we talk about awareness all the time, don't we? But, just being aware. And if you get a whiff that maybe your child is doing something that something seems to be driving your child to want to do really well that might not be coming from within themselves. So my 16-year-old is absolutely, he's driven. He really wants to do really well. He's doing his exams this year, and I don't feel I'm putting him under any pressure. Maybe I should be putting him under a bit more pressure. I don't know. It's that fine balance. I don't know.
Right. Right.
But he wants to do really well. And he's actually really quite competitive. And he doesn't get that from me, and he doesn't get that from his dad. I mean, we're a bit competitive, but we're not really super competitive. So, and he has a real driven competitive streak in him. So that is him, you know. But I keep saying to him, you know, make sure you're happy with the choices that you're making, and are you making them for you and you're not following your friends? Or he's now talking about doing further up school, the next level, what I did, you know, doing maths and further maths and all this. And I'm saying, you know, just make sure you're doing it because you want to do it. Please don't be doing it because I did it, because it's a lot of maths. Half of every single day at school will be maths. So you know, and so I don't want parents listening to feel like, oh God, you know, what am I doing? Just, you know, relax. It's fine, because actually, if you're worried about what you're doing, the chances are that you're on it.
You know, exactly. You're doing a decent job. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. So don't worry about it. And it's not to throw parents under the bus either. And I don't want people sort of thinking they've got to go and give their parents a what for, because this is all about awareness, isn't it? And how we can help people see things in themselves that maybe they might want to change, but it's their responsibility.
100%.
Yeah. Sorry, so I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, haven't I? Sorry.
No, but so glad you did, because no, this is not about parent bashing. In fact, I mean, my parents did what they did out of love and out of trying to give me the best.
Yes.
And it's not just parents that we get these messages from,
no,
right?
Of course
it's the world that we swim in and all of those systems. So we're getting these messages all over the place. And awareness, to your point, that's what we're trying to offer, for people to have an awareness of what's driving them on the inside, so that if it's not feeling good, they have some choices. Right? I wanted to share a Dr. Brené Brown quote. I love her work on
me too,
on this topic. And in The Gifts of Imperfection, she said this: perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. It's a shield. It's a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact, it's the thing that's really preventing us from flight. And I just left that quote.
You read that to me before we started, and even now again, it's making me feel really quite emotional. It's the embodiment of like the weight of the world on your shoulders, isn't it?
Yes, it's the weight of the world on your shoulders while trying to project that everything's fine. I've got it all under control. It's good. I'm good. I'm perfect. I'm back here. It's great.
Yeah.
And it's so, I find it to be so isolating, because it's the constant, for me, it was a constant mask wearing and projecting of like, no, I got it all under control. It's fine here. My house always looks perfectly clean, and I always look perfect, and I always do the perfect things, and I always get the perfect grades, and my work is always like, it's exhausting. And it's not true. So it was constantly just like, I hope no one finds out. Perfectionism looked like two different things for me. It was, I hope no one finds out what I'm really like. If they see under the surface and see this mess, they won't love me. They won't love me. And it also, as it carried on into adulthood, trying to view every task as needing to be perfect, and my whole beingness as needing to be perfect, whatever the F that looked like, right? It was exhausting. And so what happened is then I stopped doing as many things, was running out of energy. It's like, well, if everything has to be perfect, I don't have that energy for that. Yeah. How about you?
And that must make your world become quite small.
So small.
Yeah, I'm
So
just getting
small.
this image of like you inside this box, and the box is
Yeah.
getting smaller and smaller because
Yes.
you don't want to you're shattered, you're absolutely exhausted by trying so
All the
hard
time.
all the time. So in
Mhm.
order to not try so hard, you sort of retreat, and
Yep.
so you don't do things, you don't try new
Yep.
things. So
Yep.
just all those opportunities to try new exciting things that you might actually turn out to be, well, it doesn't matter whether you're good at, but you might turn out to be really good at, or you might turn out to
Yeah.
really love and
Yes.
enjoy. Even if you're really rubbish at it, you really love
Yes.
it.
That's
And,
right.
and who's to decide who says you're good or rubbish anyway? I mean,
Uh-huh.
if you enjoy and you miss all those opportunities
Yes.
to do all those things, and all that can come to us in our adulthood as a step by step progression of the things that we've learned in childhood.
That's right.
And a lot of it is subconscious. A lot of it we're not even
Oh
aware
gosh.
is going on.
Not at all. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you asked me how did it come to me? So
Yeah.
as is well documented on this podcast now, I grew up with an alcoholic mother, and as I got into my teens, her drinking got worse. I had
Mm.
3 younger brothers. I was the only girl. So I became sort of like a second mother, and I'd come home from school and I'd instantly be expected to take over the care of certainly the 2 younger ones. And it became very much I didn't have to be a perfect. It was very much people pleasing in the big sort of way of looking at it. In that, if I could come home and do things and hopefully to please my mother, then maybe we'd have a calmer evening. So it was a constant striving to do things that so she didn't have to do them, or to do things to please her, to try and make her happy. But ultimately, she was so miserable. I was
Mm.
never going to make her happy anyway. And I just made
Yeah.
myself miserable in the, as a result of doing that.
Yeah.
It definitely found its way into school. School was my safe place. At school, the teachers were largely quite nice to me. I was lucky, I was quite academic, so I could do school. I didn't find it that hard.
Mm-hmm.
So it was at least a place I could go to and feel like I was doing okay.
Yeah.
And I did really well in my exams. I didn't get straight A's, but I got quite a few A's and a few B's. I did really well. And I didn't, which is really interesting because I didn't get praise for it, because at home my mum was totally not interested in education, because
Yeah.
she wasn't academic. So she was like, oh, it became something that became a barrier between us in a way. I think now looking back, she could see me moving away from her.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result of me moving away from her, I think in her mind, and her losing control over me, I lost any bond there was with her. So what then happened is, certainly when I started work, I looked for praise there. I worked so hard, such long hours. I also tried to party really hard as well to fit in with friends. So,
Yeah.
my 20s there were some great fun times, but on the whole, it was exhausting, because I was
Yeah.
trying to fit in at work, trying to fit in with my friends by being as perfect as I could be in those situations, because largely underneath it all, I felt pretty worthless.
Mm.
So, I mean, that is perfectionism in some way, but it perhaps, I mean, it is, but it looks and mine definitely came from the trauma. Mine was definitely
Yeah.
a need for love, a need for connection, a need for people to
Yes.
be nice to me. Um,
Yes.
Yeah. And then when I got married and had kids, it was like, okay, so I had to be still the best at my job, good at my job, and keep a good home, and, take my kids to like singing classes and this, that, and the other. And, make sure the home's clean and we're eating good food. I mean, gosh, my first one got pureed everything. The second one got jars all the way, because by the time I had the second one, I was a bit more relaxed. It was this facade on the front that was like, yeah, everything's great.
Yeah.
When it wasn't.
Yeah. When it wasn't. Yeah. Oh, so relatable, Philippa.
Yeah. And now, as when we came on, I was like, oh God, I look a bit wrecked today, and my hair's a bit of a mess. And we were going, well, this is perfect, isn't it, for the perfectionism, recording? Because it's like, yeah, I'm here, I'm doing it. Who out there is to tell me that I'm not? It's not okay for me to come and record a video and an audio podcast with you looking like I do today. And nobody, there isn't somebody out there. That's the whole thing with perfectionism, that there isn't an arbitrary sort of standard that you can compare yourself to. There is nobody out there who can tell you whether what you think is perfect is right or wrong. There is nobody judging you anywhere near as much as you're judging yourself.
You're judging yourself. Yeah, that's right. And like, who defines perfect? That's something that I started asking myself. I was like, well, wait, what is this perfect standard? Where did this come from? What is this perfect thing that I'm trying to achieve? Where does that come from? And
did that help you? Did that help you?
Oh my gosh, it did help me, because it helped me just start to recognize this thing that I'm chasing is just a totally made up thing, right? Like, no matter what I could point at and say, well, a perfect this looks like this. Some person or collection of people decided what that looked like and maybe put that out into the world, and I consumed it and went, oh, okay. Like when you were describing as a wife and a mother, like all these things you're supposed to do, like we get those messages. Here's what it means to be. Well, who decided that? People. Right. So I was like, okay. So it's all just made up. Like we all just made it up. I remember reading about, I mean, obviously in Western society, all my growing up, beauty standards were very narrow. I think they're starting to expand now, and I'd love to see that. But beauty standards were very narrow. And I remember seeing a documentary about a tribe, and it's on the continent of Africa. Forgive me, I can't remember where it was now. It's been forever since I saw it. But in this tribe of people, their beauty standard for wives, when women got engaged, they would literally take her and fatten her up. It was like they would feed her like all the best things and fatten her up. And I'm not saying that is the way to go either, but I was just like, that was their beauty standard. And I was like, oh, okay, we're just all making this shit up, right? It's like what the messages I was getting around beauty were completely opposite from the messages these women were getting about beauty. Like, oh, we're just making it all up. Okay. Well, there's freedom in realizing we're just making it up.
There absolutely is freedom in that. You're right. And I think if you think about it in a sort of really logical way, because there is no arbitrary standard, there is nobody who can come and, like, I don't know, look at my bookcase and tell me whether my books are on there in a perfect way or not. I mean, that's a silly example. I am on a hiding to nothing by wanting the perfect bookcase, because I will never achieve it.
Right.
Because there is no achieving perfection.
Yes.
So I am literally setting myself on a course of unhappiness and all the, I wish I could think of a better word right now, but I'm setting myself on a course of total dissatisfaction, because I'm chasing something that doesn't even exist.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's this, and the internal dialogue of you're reaching for this thing which doesn't exist, and because you don't hit it, then it's the feeling of failing.
Yes,
Right. And so
constantly.
then it's this internal constant like judgment and like, oh, and I failed again and I'm not meeting the standard, and all of the energy drain that comes with that constantly berating yourself and thinking of how you're not doing it enough and you're failing. It's exhausting.
It
Yeah.
absolutely is. And the
And
more,
there's no winning that game. You can't win. You
no,
can't win it.
no. So really, by understanding that, being aware of it and noticing that that's what we are doing, hopefully we can start putting some new thoughts in place, some new practices where we can practice being imperfect.
Yes.
And realize that actually it's okay. Nobody thinks any less of us. The world doesn't stop turning, it is absolutely fine. I had to, and I would really, implore anybody listening who might recognize any of what we're saying to try putting some of those changes in place now. Don't wait, I had to wait to lose a lot of the sight in my right eye to actually begin to realize any of how I was operating. And I was 47. That is a lot of wasted years. And I don't sort of harp on about it, because actually better to have realized then to have never realized.
That's right.
So you're never too old to realize things, never too old to make changes. And I mean, it can feel, I don't know, it's just really interesting because it can feel harder maybe after so many years to make those changes, but I didn't find it harder. I think I found with age came the not giving quite so much of a F about it all. And actually maybe by then I found it easier to put changes in place, maybe because it came at a good time in my life. And I'm a great believer in it. These things come to us when we're ready to hear it and we're ready to do something about it.
100%. Yeah. I think one of the gifts of middle age is, especially like if we're talking about perfectionism, well, I tried to be perfect. Like I did all the perfect things, and then bad stuff can still happen in life, and I could still not achieve the perfect life. And so it's like all the things that perfectionism promised didn't happen. So then it was like, oh, okay, well, I'm expending all that energy and not getting this wonderful magical payoff. So maybe I could try something different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you said then that's the thing about middle age. I'm like, oh, because I never used to understand. I remember when I was a lot younger, my auntie, who is in her mid-70s now, but she'd say, oh, I still feel like I'm 20 or something. And I'd be like, what? Like when I was 20, I didn't understand that. And now I'm 54, as I was last week. I kind of like, yes, I'm 54. Yes, that's middle-aged. Yes. I suppose when I was 20, I thought I'd be retiring now. But actually, I don't feel that different. So actually, it's really, we realize that it's who we are. We feel the way we feel because of who we are, not because of an age, not because of, to a little extent, partly what has happened to us growing up, because what happened, this spirit that is in me, that this sort of this spirit in me that is now helping me and wanting me to speak and do these things, and it's my spirit and your spirit that have kind of connected and brought us together. That part of me was frozen for a long time because it wasn't safe. That's how I talk about it. But now it is safe, and now we're having a ball. And to leave those people pleasing and perfectionist tendencies behind, it's a work in progress. It's just like shedding this big weight You know,
Yes.
what did Brené Brown call it? A 10-ton shield.
Yeah.
And the freedom in it is just incredible. You know, if anybody was coming around, I'd always have to make sure my house was really tidy and clean. And I mean, I'm naturally tidy, as is my husband, so it's not a major sort of job. But now I'm like, yeah, come on in. You know, I don't know. You know, if I haven't hoovered for a couple of days, it doesn't matter. Just come on in.
That's right.
Vacuumed, you'd probably, I don't know. Would you say
vacuumed?
We
say vacuum, but I understand Hoover. Yes.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Hoover's a trade name anyway, so I should be saying vacuumed. But yeah, and I know that's a silly, but you know, that sort of thing would have really bothered me.
Yes, it's not silly, because those are the things that drain the energy, right? And can keep us distant, because it's like, oh no, my house isn't good enough to allow people to be here with me. And that is something I relate to that one. Yeah.
And while those people are there with you, you're busy worrying about what they're saying, what they're noticing, and what you haven't managed to do, rather than being there with them and having a great chat, a laugh, whatever it is. So, which takes us back to the point you made about it being quite isolating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. When you said freedom, you know, like when you putting away perfectionism, people pleasing, the freedom in that, it's palpable. And again, to all the listeners, neither one of us are saying we're perfect at not being perfect. It's a journey, right? I call myself a recovering perfectionist, a recovering people pleaser. It is a journey, and it is all about what Philippa's talking about, awareness, right? So as we get more aware, and as we put more practices in place, and we give ourselves a break, you know, it can create more of that space and freedom and connection with people. I have found that dropping that perfectionist mask is what has allowed me to have really deep, wonderful, beautiful connections with people. Because how can you connect to someone who's like perfect? And I'm saying that with bunny ears for those of you listening. Like, because we all know deep down we're not perfect. So when you see someone else's perfect facade, it's like, how do I connect with that? I'll never measure up.
Yeah. Right? I completely agree with you. I remember when I first went to therapy, so that's like 2017. I remember going out for a walk with a really good friend of mine and telling her the things that I'd been learning in therapy, and she just stopped and said to me, oh God, she said, because she knows quite a bit of my story, and she knew at that time quite a bit of my backstory, and she said, you know, I knew that there must be more to you, that it couldn't be as easy for you as you were making it appear. And I was worried that you weren't talking about it, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to get in, because there was never any room to talk about those things. And now to hear that you talking about it and owning it, and you know, telling me how hard it is at times, just makes. She said, you know, it just makes me so happy to hear that you are now able to tell me those things. And that was it's making me feel quite emotional just telling you about it. That was a real moment of understanding that perfectionism keeps people away.
Yeah.
Perfectionism becomes a barrier between you and other people.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Yeah. And like you, I have had so many wonderful people come into my life in the last 6 years, and that is no coincidence. That is absolutely a direct result of me being more open and less trying to seek perfection, and be more vulnerable, and owning what's going on for me a bit more. A lot more.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, beautifully said. Yeah, perfectionism, actually, let me say it this way, like when we give ourselves permission to not be perfect, we're actually giving that same permission to the people around us, right? So which is so freeing. Again, I'll go back to that word. You know, I grew up in a household, both my parents have perfectionist tendencies, you know, that they got from their growing up. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
it's been a pattern in our family.
Yeah.
And but you know, that can, seeing perfection around you constantly, it's, for me, it just felt like I was constantly measuring up. It's just like, oh, got to be this in order to be loved, which is not ever what my parents said, and honestly not how they behaved either, but that's what I internalized.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's just so isolating, but letting those walls down and showing people I'm this real human under here. Well, then we get to connect to other real humans. It's we're all that. We're all that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I
So
shared
helpful.
with you before we started recording, actually, something that somebody sent to me just like a couple of hours ago. And, you know, nature always seems to have the answers, doesn't it?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was about, I'm going to get this a little bit wrong because I always do, but it was about, you know, go out into the, and there you go,
You're
perfectionism.
going
It's
to do it
fine. I'm going to
imperfectly.
mess it up, so it's going to be fine. But, you know,
Yeah.
if you go out into the forest or into a wood, you know, and there's trees everywhere, and some trees will be straight, some trees will be bent over, some trees will have branches missing. None of them are actually perfect. And
whatever that means.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So they're all different. There's different shapes and sizes. I love it when you see trees that are obviously in the prevailing wind and they're all growing sideways because they're constantly in the wind. You know, they were probably in different circumstances, they'd be growing straight up, but they're not.
Yep.
But we accept that. We see that things have happened to them, that you know, maybe one hasn't had enough light, so it's bent to find the light. One's been blown over by the wind. They're all shapes and sizes, and for all different reasons. And we just look at that and we just accept it.
Yes.
Because that's the way it is. But when we come to human beings, we then have these ridiculous standards. We judge ourselves and we judge other people. And it's less okay to not be within these parameters of whatever these non-existent airy-fairy sort of standards are. You know?
Yes.
And it just becomes self-perpetuating.
It really does. Yeah.
So accepting, and this is what I'm always talking about, accepting who we are. So accepting for ourselves who we are and loving ourselves for who we are allows us to then do that with others. So if I accept myself, how I am, I can accept others how they are, because I'm not judging myself and I'm not going to judge them for how they are. And then that becomes a self-perpetuating thing, hopefully, and less judgment, you know, more kindness, more love, and all those things that we've talked about. But it kind of has to come, as the answer always is, it has to come from inside.
Always.
Yeah.
It's very tied to self-love.
Of course it is.
Self-acceptance. 100%.
Yeah. So any you know, perfectionists out there, people pleasers, you know, we see you. We really do. And it is exhausting. And you know, hopefully we might have given you some ideas. I'm wondering, what can we say as in a way to get started, I suppose. Well, I'm coming back to what I always say, awareness. Well, you've listened to us now, so we've raised your awareness about something, and you're noticing what you're doing. What little changes can you make? And I think we've already said that a little bit. Try and be imperfect.
Yeah, I have a great example of someplace that I started.
Yeah, please.
Was with my laundry. You know, I had everything folded perfectly, looked beautifully. Maybe walk into my closet, it's lovely.
Is it all color coded?
Color coded. Oh. Yeah. I mean, for the 30 seconds a day I spent in my closet, it was absolute joy. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like it brought me joy to look at it. The downside of it was that I didn't enjoy the process of folding the laundry and getting everything to look perfect. And it was such an energy. So then I'd be like, oh, I gotta do laundry. And it just felt like such this monumental task. Then I would put it off, and then it would be a bigger task, and then I would put it off, and then it felt overwhelming. So it was, and then it was constantly like, I'm failing at laundry, which sounds funny to say, but it felt really real,
Yes,
like failing at laundry.
And you have to do laundry. You do have to do it.
You do. It's something that needs to happen. And one day I just remember going, there's no laundry police. There's no one that's going to come check my drawers to make sure that my undergarments are perfectly folded. And then I was like, do they even need to be folded? Like, they do not. And I just gave myself permission to not fold stuff. I don't fold my underoos. I don't fold my bras. I don't fold my undershirts. I don't fold socks. I bought all socks that are the same and throw them in a drawer. And it's like, what that did for me is, first of all, released me from the laundry has to look a certain way in order for me to be doing it right, in order to get the credit for it, right?
Yeah.
And it turned it just into, hey, this is something that needs to get done. It doesn't have to be done perfectly.
Yeah.
And it made the task more accessible. It's not like, I don't want people to think that what we're trying to say is you shouldn't strive for things, and that's not at all it, but it is about being really selective about what you care so much about, right?
Yes.
Because to care so much about the perfection of everything for me was just, it didn't work for me. So I wasn't able to do it. To think about where do I want to spend my energy? Like you were talking in the last podcast about our resource management system, right?
Yes.
We have limited energy resource. And so where do I want to spend it?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like a boundary you put in place for yourself, as I'm not going to fold things up like I did before. Yeah.
I'm not folding laundry. I'll hang laundry and I'll just throw it in a drawer, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I stopped ironing 4 years ago.
Oh gosh, I haven't seen an iron in half a decade.
Yeah. Nope. Exactly. Life's too short to iron, as far as I'm concerned now.
Agreed.
And like you say, there's no laundry police, there's no vacuuming police, there's no but also, as you say, this is not about not being able to have a healthy striving for something. And that's the difference. Is it healthy striving to want more, better, to improve at something, whatever it is there a healthy intention behind that? Or is there an unhealthy intention, which is about feeling a lack of worth and trying to improve that lack of worth by doing things that other people are then going to validate you for?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it often shows up in things like laundry and dishes.
Dishwasher. The dishwasher. That's
I was sharing with you.
If you want some, if you want to try things. So I know Robbie's got a story. The other thing I was thinking about is, I know a lot of people get really stressed about the way the dishwasher is loaded.
Yep.
Yes,
the perfect way to load the
perfect way, and everyone has that perfect way to load their dishwasher. I don't go anywhere near the dishwasher because, frankly, my husband I can't stand the way he does it, so I just let him do it, and I have nothing to do with it. And that's fine. He's happy, I'm happy. That's fine. But also, you've got another thing about the dishwasher, haven't you?
I do. I was raised in a house where we washed every dish and then put it in the dishwasher. And I grew up well into my 40s, I think. I'm just like, well into my 40s, thinking that that's what needed to happen. And I remember one day thinking, what if I didn't wash the dishes first? Like, what if? And I tried it. I just put the dishes in. 90-something% of the dishes came out wonderfully perfect. The other small percentage I just ran through again. And I thought, the time spent for me was enormous, the energy spent. And again, the mental drain of thinking, I gotta deal with the dishes. Well, now it's just great, throw the dishes in there.
Yeah.
the concept that I kept hearing so much growing up is if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And it's like, well, some things are just, you just do them shitty and just get them done,
Do them shitty.
Load
your
dishwasher,
exactly.
Just load it and just do it. Like, spend your energy on the things that bring you joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there is no dishwasher police. There is no laundry police. Nobody's going to come round and tell you that you've done it wrong. And it is about, that mental load of that thinking, constantly thinking about how do I do this, and I've got to do this. And I say quite a lot, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. But in my mind, the way I take that, so it's all about interpretation. So it's all about communicating. What do we mean about these things? So there's nothing wrong really with saying most things. It's just what meaning is being taken from it. And
that's right.
I would say that for me, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well, is about healthy striving. But I totally understand. I totally understand how it's come to mean something different for you. And I get that. So it is about being more clear with each other in the language we're using. What does it mean?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to be more clear using that again. When I use that with my kids, I'm going to be clear what I mean about it. Because I hadn't really appreciated the other take that you can have on that. So thank you.
No worries. One of the other things I did want to mention before we go too is that perfectionism kept me from creating and putting things into the world. And I think it just does. And lots of my clients, I hear that too. Like, it stops us from putting something out there because it's not perfect yet. And man, if I waited till I was some brand of perfect in my mind, I wouldn't be here on this podcast. And this brings me so much joy. And we're hearing from people that it's helping them. And I think about all the things that I could have done that I didn't. Like, I would get to a point, and then it's just like it becomes this constant iteration of the smallest thing to make it just this much more perfect. But the energy spend on it just kept accumulating, and then the mind spins out, and it's just like, never mind. Like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. I'm not good enough. It becomes that script. And I love talking about perfectionism because I want people to put themselves into the world, put their creations into the world. Now, I say I'm recovering perfectionist because the stuff still comes up for me. But now when it comes up, I know it's because I'm stretching. And so I can look at it differently, and I'll be like, I'm growing. That's great. Like, here comes the voices, because that means I did a growth thing. And it's all in how it's a shift in perspective, right? It's looking at things differently and saying, instead of now being stopped by, I'm not good enough, I'm not perfect enough, I want people to know that perfection is not the price of admission for your life. Perfectionism is not the price of admission to do things that you want to do. I want people to know you can be imperfect and make an impact. And so please, imperfectly go out there and make your impacts. We need you.
We do. You're absolutely.
We need you.
You're so, and that's such a important thing to say, because you are right. And I think creativity is what feeds our soul, and a lot of us will absolutely avoid that if we don't think that we're good at it. And if you look at anybody who will tell you about podcasts, so there's plenty of people out there who will tell you how to put a podcast together, how to release a podcast, and a lot of them will say edit out the ums and the ahs. And I purposely have not edited out any of them in any of my episodes, partly because I want to be imperfect, because otherwise I would absolutely get obsessed with the ums and the ahs. I'm trying to get better naturally at not doing it. Still very much a work in progress. It's all about trying to think silently in your head and not go as you think about it. But you know, if I had taken that to heart, I would either have had to find an editor. I mean, I have got an editor, to be fair, and he would take them all out if I asked him to, but I don't want them taken out because I think it's the natural way the conversation flows. But it was also an exercise for me in not being perfect and just getting it out in the world.
Yes.
It really was.
Now it's all you can hear, right?
It is. All I can hear is that I say and and actually all the time. So if anybody else has noticed those, I do know I'm doing it, and I'm trying not to.
But welcome to being human. Right?
Exactly. I am just human. You're right. As are you. As are as are we all. You know. So hopefully we can inspire people to perhaps be a little bit less perfect and more imperfect as a result of this.
That's right.
Thank you. I've loved this conversation. I knew we would. This is really what you love talking about, and it's been amazing. So thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you for listening, everybody. And we'll be back next time with another episode. And until then, take care. Thanks for listening to HSP Connection. If you've enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate the podcast and share it with anyone you think might be interested. It helps others find us. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave us a review.
To get in touch with us, you can email us at hspconnectionpodcast@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you with your thoughts and comments on the episodes and any suggestions you have for future topics and guests.
We are both HSP coaches and speakers. And to find out more about Robbie, go to Robbie Lee, that's leigh.com.
And to find out more about Philippa, go to safeandsupported.co.uk. See you next time.